Welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into the aftermath of a match that was, honestly, historic, highly emotional, and incredibly controversial. Today, we're breaking down a World Cup final that was fully expected to be a massive celebration of the globe's two greatest footballing nations. Instead, it turned into a total clash of philosophies. On one side, you had Spain, bringing their renowned beautiful game, and on the other, defending champions Argentina, relying pretty heavily on what critics are flat-out calling the dark arts. We're going to unpack the tactics, the on-pitch drama, and the massive fallout from this 1-0 Spanish victory using some really fantastic insights from the ESPN FC panel.
You know it's serious when veteran analysts don't hold back. The sheer shock across the footballing world was palpable. This isn't just everyday fan chatter on social media. This is a direct quote from the experts over at ESPN FC. They literally did not mince words, calling it one of the worst World Cup finals they have ever seen and labeling Argentina's performance a complete and utter disgrace. When you've got former professional players and seasoned pundits reacting with that level of absolute disgust, you know we aren't just talking about a team having a bad day at the office. We're talking about a fundamental breakdown in how the game is supposed to be played on its absolute biggest stage.
Section 1. A win for beautiful football. Spain versus Argentina.
So the panel basically framed this whole match as a philosophical battle between two totally different mindsets. They observed that Spain came into this final with a mentality that was fluid, attacking, and incredibly brave on the ball. They genuinely wanted to play football. Argentina, on the flip side, took a completely different route. The panel heavily criticized the defending champions for leaning entirely into cynical fouls, constant complaining to the referee, and just relentless time wasting. Instead of using their world-class talent to actually outplay Spain, the experts noted that Argentina seemed laser-focused on just dragging Spain down into the mud.
And if you want to know just how deep those negative tactics went, you really only need to look at one staggering number: 100. It took Argentina, a squad packed with Champions League winners and global superstars, an astounding 100 minutes to register a single shot on goal. Think about that for a second. We are talking about a World Cup final, and a team featuring some of the most gifted attackers on the planet couldn't even muster a speculative effort from distance for over an hour and a half. For the analysts, this one stat perfectly captured the absolute depths of Argentina's anti-football tactics. But honestly, it wasn't just the lack of attacking threat that had everyone fuming. It was the antics. The broadcast panel was furious over specific moments that completely overshadowed Argentina's talented roster. You had Enzo Fernandez picking up a senseless red card for a reckless challenge while he was already on a yellow, and then somehow having the audacity to complain about it. You had goalkeeper Amy Martinez staying down on the pitch pretending to be severely injured when replays clearly showed he was completely untouched. And then veteran defender Nicolas Otamendi engaging in some wildly theatrical diving after the most minimal accidental contact. The pundits felt this went way beyond normal gamesmanship. It was effectively cheating, and just a terrible image for the sport overall.
Section 2. The architects of victory.
Now, while Argentina was catching heat from the footballing world, Spain's heroes somehow kept their composure. Which brings us to the brilliant mind behind Spain's success. Manager Luis de la Fuente was actually dubbed God by one of the panelists, which tells you everything you need to know about how high the praise was. Why? Because he perfectly harnessed that famous attacking Barcelona mentality, where players are always looking to turn and immediately move the ball forward. He was also highly praised for his masterful, game-changing substitutions throughout the tournament. He wasn't afraid to drop big names when necessary, bringing on guys like Moreno and Ferran Torres at the exact right moments. Plus, he made the incredibly bold, calculated decision to start Unai Simon as a sweeper keeper, which allowed Spain to play a dangerously high and aggressive defensive line.
And hey, speaking of that Barcelona connection, you literally can't talk about this team without bringing up Lamine Yamal. I mean, his timeline is just unbelievable. At just 19 years old, he has built a resume that most seasoned veterans only dream of. Debuting in the Barcelona first team at 16, and now adding La Liga, European, and World Cup championships to his name all by 19, the panel highlighted the massive, emotional celebrations that broke out in his humble, working-class hometown neighborhood of Rocafonda in Catalonia. He is a profound inspiration, really proving that this Spanish victory was a triumph of youth and community, just as much as it was about tactics.
All of this tactical brilliance and youthful energy built right up to the climax of the match. Substitute Ferran Torres, a player who has definitely faced his fair share of critics and scapegoating over the years, stepped up exactly when they needed him. He scored a beautiful, composed, side-footed winning goal. The panel made a great point here, noting that in the past, Torres might have panicked and wildly smashed that ball over the crossbar, but his improved finishing and sheer composure secured the 1-0 victory, instantly transforming him into a national hero.
Section 3. Rodri, the ultimate water carrier.
Now, attackers usually steal the spotlight, right? But the tournament's most valuable player award actually went to someone whose specific role is finally getting the respect it deserves. To really understand this, we need to look at a classic football term, the water carrier. Historically, this has been kind of a patronizing, pejorative term for a defensive midfielder. You know, the guy whose only job is to do the dirty work, win the ball back, and just hand it off to the flashy start players. But the panel argued that Rodri winning the golden ball completely reclaims and elevates this role. It proves once and for all that the engine of the team is just as vital as the hood ornament.
The panel summed up this entire shift in perspective perfectly, and this quote is great. They said, "People pay tickets because they want to see Messi, but people who love football want to pay tickets to see Rodri." That is a really powerful distinction. The experts are basically arguing that while casual fans are always chasing those isolated, magical moments from older superstars, true football purists value the consistent, metronomic brilliance and absolute intelligence that a player like Rodri brings to every single second of a match.
And this actually ties into a much bigger debate about modern football awards. The panel heavily contrasted Rodri's Golden Ball win with Kylian Mbappe taking home the Golden Boot. They view Rodri's award as a massive triumph for collective teamwork, bravery, and consistency. Meanwhile, they largely dismissed Mbappe's Golden Boot as a purely individual statistical pursuit. In fact, they pointed out that playing in a newly bloated 48-team tournament against arguably lesser opposition and padding your stats in a totally meaningless third-place playoff game really dilutes the prestige of the top goal scorer award.
Section 4. FIFA's Americanized World Cup.
But listen, the panel didn't just target the teams on the pitch. They had some major grievances with the organization itself. Specifically, they pointed out that the presentation felt aggressively Americanized. Traditional European fans absolutely hated that the hydration breaks essentially turned a beautifully flowing game of halves into 4 clunky quarters, basically giving managers free time for mini tactical meetings. They also criticized the new Super Bowl-style halftime shows and lamented the dilution of quality that naturally comes with jumping to a massive 48-team roster. And perhaps most seriously, they called out what they described as a Wild West political intervention by FIFA President Gianni Infantino regarding a player named Balogun, a move they felt highlighted a really dangerous lack of integrity at the very top executive levels of the sport. Okay, to be fair, it wasn't all doom and gloom on the refereeing and organizational front. The panel did briefly acknowledge a few silver linings. They really appreciated the quick, efficient video reviews utilized to accurately determine corner kicks versus goal kicks, which prevented teams from getting unfair set pieces. They also highly praised the successful clampdowns on time wasting, specifically stopping players from taking an absolute eternity on throw-ins. These are positive, concrete rule enforcement changes that the panel sincerely hopes will carry over into domestic club football.
Section 5. Why the best team won.
So when the dust finally settled on all the drama, the fouls, and the FIFA critiques, what's the ultimate takeaway here? Well, the absolute consensus among the experts was simply this: the best team won, and it's great for football. Spain wasn't just lucky. They were riding a phenomenal 38-game unbeaten streak. They fully committed to playing the beautiful game, they trusted their youthful talent, and they totally refused to be dragged down into cynical tactics. The panel views this not just as a well-deserved victory for Spain, but really as a moral victory for the sport itself.
So, this leaves us with a massive question to ponder. Will Spain's triumph permanently end the era of negative defensive tactics in international football? Can their bravery on the ball finally convince other nations to abandon the dark arts once and for all? It's something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I will see you in the next one.